When Dylan Turner transferred to Westfield High in the middle of the school year, he didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. New friends, new teachers, and new routines were all he could think about. He had just moved to the small town of Grayson, Illinois from California, and the change was overwhelming. Everything felt smaller and quieter compared to his old life in Los Angeles. The once lively streets filled with noise and energy had been replaced by a stillness that Dylan found both comforting and unsettling. His first day at Westfield High started as expected. Awkward introductions, curious stares, and the standard questions from classmates trying to gauge the new kid. "Why'd you move here? California, huh? Do you surf?" Dylan answered politely, though he could sense the unspoken judgment behind their words. Grayson wasn't the kind of place where people moved to, it was the kind of place where you were born, grew up, and stayed forever. By lunchtime, he had already begun to piece together the social hierarchy. The athletes dominated one side of the cafeteria, the artsy kids and band members occupied another, and everyone else seemed to scatter in the middle. Dylan found himself gravitating toward Jake, a stocky kid with freckles and an easygoing demeanor who didn't seem to fit neatly into any group. "You can sit here if you want," Jake had said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "I mean, unless you're holding out for the cool kids." Dylan chuckled. "Nah, this works." As the two started talking, Dylan learned that Jake was a bit of an outsider too, known for his offbeat sense of humor and knack for storytelling. It didn't take long for the conversation to turn toward the strange quirks of Westfield High. "You're going to hear a lot of weird stuff about this place," Jake said between bites of his sandwich. "But there's one thing you need to know right away." Dylan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What's that?" "Don't go in the boys' bathroom at the far end of the West Wing. Ever?" Dylan laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. "What, is it haunted or something?" Jake didn't laugh. Instead, his expression grew serious, his freckles standing out against his suddenly pale face. "That bathroom, it's not right? What's that supposed to mean?" Dylan asked, leaning in. Jake shrugged and avoided eye contact. "Just don't. Nobody uses it unless they're desperate." Before Dylan could press him for details, the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. Jake quickly changed the subject, but the ominous warning lingered in Dylan's mind. At first, Dylan thought it was nothing more than an urban legend, the kind every school seemed to have. Maybe it was a prank meant to scare the new kid. But as the day went on, he noticed how other students reacted when the West Wing bathroom came up in conversation. They would exchange uneasy glances or lower their voices to whispers, as if even talking about it too loudly might invite trouble. The way they spoke about it wasn't playful or exaggerated, it was cautious, as if they were tiptoeing around something real. By the time the final bell rang, curiosity had taken hold of Dylan. He wasn't one to believe in ghost stories, but he couldn't deny the allure of solving the mystery that had everyone else spooked. Little did he know, some mysteries are better left unsolved. Westfield High was a typical American high school. Beige hallways lined with lockers, buzzing fluorescent lights, and a steady hum of chatter between classes. The West Wing, however, was different. It was older, quieter, and always seemed colder than the rest of the building. The janitors rarely ventured there unless necessary, and most students avoided it altogether. The boys' bathroom in question was tucked away at the end of a dimly lit corridor. Its cracked tiles, rusted mirrors, and flickering lights gave it an unsettling vibe. But the real horror lay in the stories whispered among students. "A kid disappeared in there once," one girl told Dylan during lunch. "No way. He didn't disappear. He just went crazy," another chimed in. "Started screaming about someone, or something, in the mirror. I heard he scratched up his own face," Jake added. "They had to take him out in restraints." Dylan listened, fascinated. Each version of the story was more dramatic than the last. Some said the bathroom was cursed. Others claimed it was haunted by the ghost of a janitor who had died there years ago. Whatever the truth, Dylan decided he had to see it for himself. It was Friday after school when Dylan made his move. Most of the students had already gone home, and the hallways were eerily silent. He walked toward the West Wing with his backpack slung over one shoulder, his footsteps echoing off the walls. When he reached the bathroom, he hesitated. The door, painted a dull gray, was slightly ajar. A faint, damp smell wafted out, mixing with the sharp scent of cleaning chemicals. Gathering his courage, Dylan pushed the door open and stepped inside. The bathroom was as decrepit as he'd imagined. The tiles were grimy, the sink stained with rust, and the mirrors, well, the mirrors were strange. They were cloudy, as if something was trapped beneath the surface, and no amount of wiping would make them clear. Dylan checked the stalls. Empty. He turned on the faucet, and the pipes groaned before spitting out a trickle of water. Everything seemed normal enough, though undeniably creepy. Then he heard it. A faint whisper. Soft, almost imperceptible, like someone speaking from far away. Dylan froze, his heart pounding. The whisper grew louder, forming unintelligible words that seemed to echo off the walls. He spun around, expecting to see someone, but the bathroom was empty. "Hello?" he called out, his voice shaky. The whisper stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the stall door at the far end creaked open on its own. Dylan bolted. Over the weekend, Dylan couldn't stop thinking about the bathroom. He didn't tell anyone what he'd experienced, fearing they'd either laugh at him or warn him not to go back. But he needed answers. On Monday, he approached Sarah, a quiet girl who was known for being the school's unofficial historian. If anyone knew the truth about the West Wing bathroom, it would be her. "It's not just a ghost story," Sarah said when Dylan asked her about it. "There was a boy, Eric Davis. He died there 10 years ago." "What happened?" Dylan asked, leaning in. Sarah hesitated. "They say he was bullied. A group of boys cornered him in that bathroom. Things got out of hand and he hit his head on the sink. The school covered it up, called it an accident, but some people think Eric never left." Dylan felt a chill run down his spine. "You think his ghost is haunting the place?" Sarah nodded. "People say he's still looking for the ones who hurt him. If you're alone in there long enough, he might mistake you for one of them." Dylan couldn't resist sharing what he'd learned with Jake and a few other friends. Predictably, it didn't take long for the conversation to turn into a dare. "You're saying the ghost only comes out if you're alone?" asked Mark, a tall, athletic guy who thrived on dares and challenges. "I'll prove it's all fake." "Don't," Sarah warned when she overheard. "It's not a joke." But Mark wouldn't listen. That afternoon, he marched into the West Wing bathroom with Dylan and Jake trailing behind. "Wait here," Mark said, grinning. "I'll be back in 5 minutes." Mark stepped inside and let the door swing shut behind him. Dylan and Jake waited, their nerves growing with each passing second. 5 minutes turned into 10, then 15. "He's messing with us," Jake muttered, though he didn't sound convinced. Dylan couldn't take it anymore. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Mark?" The bathroom was empty. Panic set in as Dylan and Jake searched the West Wing. Mark was nowhere to be found. They reported his disappearance to the principal, who called the police, but no one could explain where Mark had gone. That night, Dylan couldn't sleep. He kept hearing the whispers in his head, growing louder and more insistent. Finally, he decided to return to the bathroom alone to confront whatever was there. The school was dark and deserted when Dylan sneaked in. He made his way to the West Wing, his flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. When he entered the bathroom, the whispers started immediately. They seemed to swirl around him, growing louder and clearer until he could make out individual words. "Help? Why? Lost? Who are you?" Dylan demanded, his voice trembling. "What do you want?" The whispering stopped. In the silence, Dylan saw something move in the mirror. It wasn't his reflection. It was a pale, gaunt boy with hollow eyes staring back at him. The boy's lips moved, forming the words that echoed through Dylan's mind. "Eric?" Dylan whispered. The figure nodded. Then, in a voice like dry leaves, it spoke. "Help me." Dylan's heart raced. "How? What do you need?" Before Eric could answer, the bathroom door slammed shut, and the lights flickered wildly. The whispers returned, louder and more chaotic. Dylan felt a cold hand on his shoulder and turned to see nothing but darkness. A shadowy form loomed behind him, its presence heavy and suffocating. "You can't help him," a new voice hissed. It was deeper, angrier, and filled with malice. "Leave." The temperature in the room plummeted, and Dylan's breath came out in visible puffs. The mirrors fogged up, and words began to etch themselves across the glass as if scratched by an unseen hand. "Run." Dylan stumbled backward, his flashlight flickering. He could feel the oppressive presence closing in, the shadows clawing at him. The door creaked open just enough for him to escape, and he didn't hesitate. He bolted down the hallway, his footsteps echoing like gunshots in the empty school. As he fled, he swore he heard Eric's voice one last time, pleading, "Don't forget me." Mark was never found. The school quietly closed off the West Wing bathroom, citing structural issues, but the students knew better. Dylan couldn't shake the experience, nor could he forget Eric's haunted eyes. Over time, he became obsessed with uncovering the full truth, poring over old newspapers and talking to anyone who might know more. He discovered that Eric's bullies had mysteriously disappeared over the years, one by one. Their fates were unknown, but Dylan had a chilling suspicion. The West Wing bathroom remained off-limits, but late at night, if you listened closely, you could still hear the whispers. Some claimed they were cries for help, while others swore they heard menacing growls warning them to stay away. Dylan knew deep down that Eric was still waiting, not just for justice but for someone brave enough to truly help him. Yet, he also understood the sinister presence wasn't Eric alone. Something darker lingered in that bathroom, a force fueled by anger and pain, feeding on the fear of anyone who entered. As the years went by, Dylan couldn't resist returning one last time. Standing outside the bathroom's boarded-up door, he whispered, "I'll find a way." And in the faintest echo, he thought he heard Eric's voice reply, "I'll be here."